Olivia Moultrie paved the way for teenagers in the NWSL, and now we see more and more players turning professional and making an immediate impact on their teams, like we just saw there. But Lisa, let's talk about the timeline that Olivia Moultrie had in the NWSL, because first of all, she declares that she wants to go pro.
Yeah, she was very young. At 13 years old, that's when Olivia Moultrie ended up filing a lawsuit against the league because of the age limit being one of the qualifiers of talent in the NWSL, which Moultrie didn't believe was fair, that you couldn't put a cap on age just to play in it. And because of that, she cracked down the door for any teenager to play in the NWSL. And there weren't any of the procedures essentially set in place for these teenagers to play, and that's why the league held off on allowing this to happen. And since Olivia Moultrie had those conversations, and she's been playing in the league, and one of the things that Moultrie is known for saying is, if you're good enough, you're old enough. It's not a matter of age. And she definitely cracked down that door and really allowed all these other players to follow in her footsteps after she went through so much up and down and back and forth after training with Portland for so long, and then ultimately signs a long deal with the Thorns so she can be there for a number of years, developing well into her 18th year.
Before we get into the other teenagers that have followed behind her, I think at the point of the lawsuit, saying a 13-year-old can play pro was a bit of a contentious topic for people. And now we see Olivia at 18 years old scoring goals for the NWSL. How do you guys think that this has gone for her?
For Olivia specifically? I think everybody has a unique path. Like even all of us, how we got to where we were is not going to look exactly the same. So I think that what is nice about Olivia is she knew from a young age what she wanted to do, and she had a pathway to get there. And if it wasn't there, she paved her own way. And I think that has allowed other players to come into the league at a younger age. But I also believe that that's not the way for everybody. I do think that there are a lot more ways to get into this league, and we've seen that throughout the NWSL's 10 years now. But this is interesting that Olivia Moultrie is just one of those players.
Let's go ahead and look at the players that we are talking about. That includes Jaden Shaw, Alyssa Thompson, Chloe Ricketts, Melanie Barcenas. All of these are teenagers that are currently playing in the NWSL. Darian, which one stands out to you?
Melanie Barcenas. I think I love how she's come into this league. She's been explosive. Her technical ability has been so fun to watch, and she said she's gained inspiration from players like Alex Morgan, Marta, who we've seen her play against, and you saw the photos of them afterwards. And yeah, just watching Marta, who we know is such an amazing person off the field as well, that's inspired all of us, and then this really young generation coming in. And she is also very aware of the fact that she is representative of her culture. And she spoke about to the LA Times saying, I'm hoping that I can pave the way so that young girls who are Latina can have someone to look up to and relate to in soccer, which I love. That speaks to me so deeply. And she's so young to have that awareness and know that, hey, young girls are going to look up to me and want to follow my path. And here's how I'm doing it. And she is walking the walk. You see her sauciness on the pitch. You see her going 1v1. I love it. I think she's going to be one of the biggest players in the NWSL up and coming, and she's seemingly handling the pressure very well, and I'm really excited for her future.
There is so much talent in that little compact stature of Melanie Barcenas. She lights it up when she comes on the field. But the thing that I think is really important, we look at NWSL right now, and there are a lot of good coaches, but there's a lot of vacancies too. And I think that this is the most important thing, is if there is going to be a pathway for these young players to play at a professional level, we have to make sure that we are caring for these players.
Yes.
And I think Casey Stoney, I've had many conversations with her, and she's done a really good job from her time in England to now being here in the United States of managing those players. And she said she was going to be really careful about how she used Melanie, and she was very careful using her this season, making sure she was putting her into positions where she could succeed and feel like she was able to express herself. And that's what you want. You don't want these players to lose some of the joy and the freedom that they have in a rigid system, which it can be at times of a professional. You have to win. They still need to learn and grow through that system as well.
I think Casey Stoney is a good example of how well she is able to develop young players, because she was able to do that with Jaden Shaw, a player that the San Diego Wave signed last season, and she took it really slow with Shaw to start the season, and when she first got minutes, and over the summer worked with her, and Shaw continued to develop, and it was her physicality mentality that grew the most in the last year. Watching her play on the pitch, she's able to hold off players now, and because of all that training, her confidence has also soared. So now she doesn't feel like she's one of the youngsters playing out there, and now we're seeing on the national team level. But the coach management of these young players is incredibly crucial, and a number of coaches have talked about it. Mark Parsons, who was with Washington Spirit this year, and Chloe Ricketts said that he really wanted to take it slow with her and not push her into those positions that were going to be in over her head. It was really an ease-in moment, and it's evidence. Ricketts had under 300 minutes in the regular season this year. Melanie Barcenas, just over 120 minutes in the league this year. So they didn't get a lot of minutes in regular season play. However, the minutes that they got were crucial points of the game where they could learn and grow as players.
Yeah, and I loved, too, you had a great question with Olivia where you spoke about the transition of soccer's just kind of fun when you're younger, and it's your escape and what you get to go do. And it still can be in your pro career, but there's a lot more pressure. So you're right, having that coach management that is hyper aware of that and still wants you to develop and find joy in the game and not have to live through the pressure of, am I starting every week? Am I going to get minutes? What's my positioning? What's my role in this game? You're just going in to have fun and do your best and kind of catch the cadence of the match and just the league in general, especially in the NWSL, because as we know, it's complete chaos. You never know what you're going to get. But you're right, the coach management is huge.
It is chaos, but I think we're starting to see a little bit of stabilization when it comes to styles of play. Like if you think about how Portland plays or how San Diego plays or even North Carolina. North Carolina has a very vivid style of play. And that is a reason they can get not just any teenager, they get a teenager from Japan to come in. You know, we're talking about all these teenagers here from the United States who find their way in, but here's a teenager in Manaka from Japan who talk about the technical ability of a team anywhere in the world. You're looking at that's the best of the best. And she's saying, I want to go in my formative years and play in NWSL. That's incredible to me. So I think that the growth of the league and the stability of the league has something to say about these players saying, I'm going to decide to forego other opportunities when it comes to high school, college, scholarships, education, and say, I'm going to go play pro. Well, it has to be a stable league, and I think we're getting to that place where it feels like you can still get the education on the side as you're pursuing a professional career.
Jordan, when you talk about the stability of the league, that's always been a question, right? And then now we're in the NWSL for a few years now, so we feel that it is more stable. Do you think that it can remain stable if we start something like NWSL academies? You know, like now that we have a better footing and foundation than we ever had in a women's league in the United States, is this the time?
I think academies are a great idea. It depends on the market, because I think there are places where the market produces really good players. Like if you're in San Diego, I don't know if you can find a better place than San Diego Surf, who continuously produce players that are of really good quality playing with youth national teams. So I think it depends on where your market is, but it's a good idea. And it's probably something that will happen, because if these players start getting younger and younger and younger, you're going to want to have something like MLS has, which is homegrown rights, where you have a right to a player and you might not incorporate them in your first team, but you know that you're building them up with that thought process of one day they can play for the first team.
I also really like the idea of academies of it being local, where you're not having to uproot your life and your family's lives to go somewhere, which, you know, if you have the ability to do that, that's amazing. That is not the case for 99% of players. So I think being able to stay local, be in a program where you're developing, your coaches are on the same wavelength of your development and where you're going to be, would be the best and most consistent and healthy environment, in my opinion, to grow up and to go into that playing to pro pipeline that we want to build for the NWSL.
Can I say one thing that I also think, because it's been stable, there's players that have played in the league for a long time who can help these young players along. There's not so much change in the teams every single year. Now you have players who can hold the hands of these young players and help guide them as they come into a professional environment.
And
it's huge.
The fact that there's already so many teenagers playing in the league, you look at Alex Pfeiffer, who just signed with the Kansas City Current. She's played with Melanie Barcenas and Alyssa Thompson at the youth level. So she talked to them and said, hey, I'm considering playing for the Kansas City Current and NWSL. Tell me a little bit about it. So yes, they have the veterans that they can learn from, but they've also got their friends from youth teams.
Incredibly important subject, and I know that we'll continue to talk about it because as more and more teenagers come into the league, it's something that has to be put in place to make sure the protection of the players and just making sure that they can unravel, desarrollo in Spanish, develop properly and as best as possible.